Well, hi everyone, Jake here from IBPF, and thank you for joining today's webinar, How I Overcame Hospitalization to Help Myself and Others. And we are honored to be joined by Paris Scobie. And Paris is a mental health speaker, host of the top 1% globally ranked podcast, Live Well Bipolar, and best-selling author of her memoir, Crooked Illness, Lessons from Inside and Outside Hospital Walls. And Paris launched Live Well Bipolar to use her lived experience to help others overcome the shame, fear, and isolation that can so often accompany living with bipolar. And her unique perspective has allowed her to share her experiences on what truly made a difference for her to help others. I want to let everyone know that there will be a question and answer session at the end of the talk. You can type in those questions at any time throughout today's webinar in the display for Q&A at the bottom of your screen. So Paris, I want to thank you so much for joining us today.
Jake, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and join you and Debbie and the rest of the team and get into this conversation. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Excellent. I'm thrilled as well.
Okay, so should we just jump into it or what? How should we do this? Because
Let's do
you're
it.
the host right now. You're the host. I am not. So you tell me what we're going to do and I will do that.
Let's do it. Let's get the slides
Okay,
up.
let's do it. Let
Get
me
it going. Let's get the
see.
ball rolling. Our audience is thrilled.
We'll pull. Okay, cool. So can you guys see this? Is it showing? Let me know.
I'm seeing
Oh,
nothing as of
oh,
now.
hold on. I didn't hit hold on. Share screen. Okay, there we go. Now it should be working.
I
Can
love it. Looks
Okay,
great.
perfect. Okay, so we are going to be talking about dismantling the roots of self-stigma today. So you guys know from the title of this webinar, we are going to be talking about how I have overcome hospitalization to be able to help myself and other people. And I would not be able to do that if I did not speak about this thing right here. But before we do that, I have a question I always show. And Jake was so awesome to tell me to take off the part where I said to shout out the answers because you guys cannot shout at me. So the question I have is something that we all have in common, right? So all of us are obviously human, right? So what does that mean, right? Who are we? So we are all someone to someone else. So we're someone's son, we're someone's daughter, we're someone's sister, we're someone's brother, we're someone's friend, we're someone's parent, or we are someone's significant other. So basically what this means is that each and every single one of us, we all have something that lets someone else know that they mean so much to us and we also mean so much to them. So basically what this means is that we all have titles, and a few of my titles, as you guys can see laid out on the screen here. So I am a daughter, I am an advocate, wife, author, friend, sister, podcaster, and most importantly, obviously, that I chose to highlight that in red for everyone here. So I am a person living with mental illness. Now, why did I highlight that? Why did I underline that in red? Because the point of this presentation is to get into this right here. So 10 years ago, I found myself struggling so badly, you guys. I was hospitalized in a psychiatric hospital. I was placed on court-ordered treatment at 19 years old. And actually, as you can see on the date of this hospital bracelet, which my photo, I was clearly not doing too well because I was going through a lot of turmoil in my life, a lot of traumas and things that I did not feel like I was able to ever face. So the date was 12/23/2014. And that is when I got admitted to the hospital. But previously to that, I was in a psychiatric holding center where I was then transported to the hospital. And the reason I want to bring this up for you guys is to let you know that I had a very bad experience in the hospital. I did not have a good experience. And I also do want to share that to not scare you guys because I've interviewed a lot of people who have had amazing experiences. They've had really great staff and people who were there and supporting them. But I also want to talk about this right here. So, as you guys can see, what would people think if they knew that I was living with this? And when I say this, what I mean is mental illness, right? Whether you have bipolar, anxiety, OCD, schizophrenia, whatever the diagnosis is, at least for me, what happened is I had such an overwhelming fear and shame and isolation around this topic right here. So some of these questions you guys see on the screen is I'll never be able to have a normal life after this. I don't know anyone else living with this. It must be my fault that I have to live with this. And this will stop me from finding a loving and supportive partner. And I have to keep hiding this because of what will happen. So these are the thoughts and the phrases and the things that I used to say to myself so many times, you guys, so many times throughout the day, throughout my life leading up to my diagnosis. And even after I got my diagnosis of bipolar 1 when I was 19, sitting in that hospital alone, afraid, just I truly did not know anyone else other than the people that I met inside the walls of that facility. I didn't know any other human beings that I knew face to face other than the people that I would go on Google. And you guys, we've all can do this, right? We can take out our phones, we can go Google, type in celebrities, people living with bipolar, right? And what do we get? We get people, but we don't know those people usually. We don't have personal connections or relationships with those people. So it makes it feel a little bit more isolating in that fact. But let me move on to this. So something else I want to emphasize is there's a big difference, at least for me, right? And I will only ever be able to speak for myself in this presentation because I am not you and you are not me. So I will not pretend like I understand anyone else's experience because I don't. I can only understand what I've lived through. So there's a big difference between how we perceive those living with a mental health condition versus a physical health condition. And this is something I started to realize pretty early on in my life, right? So I started to struggle with my mental health even before my hospitalization. So you guys know, 19 years old, hospitalized, but how did I get there, right? So I want to get into these differences. And one of the biggest things is I think, at least in my experience, is with a physical health condition, sometimes we are able to see that, right? We can visibly see when someone has a cold or they're coming down with some kind of physical illness. They have to get a kidney transplant, or they had a heart surgery, or they were diagnosed with cancer, or they're dealing with something that requires medical intervention, right? We can see that, but we are not always able to see clearly when someone is struggling with a mental health condition. So why is that, right? And this is because of these three things right here. And this is the roots of self-stigma. And self-stigma is what I have found one of the contributing factors that feeds into keeping the roots of stigma flourishing so that we are not able to come together collectively. So I put shame here, and then I put fear, and then I put isolation. And I can be honest with you guys, before this presentation, Jake was like, send me your slides. And I went in here and I was like, I need to fix these slides because I need to make these look a little bit more, just a little bit more realistic to what is actually going on. So the reason I made shame so much bigger than the rest is because shame is something that we cannot always see in other people. We feel it inside of ourselves. We know that we carry shame. Sometimes we do. We don't always know that, but that is usually the biggest factor in keeping that flourishing, right? And then we move into fear. So what is fear, right? So fear is obviously, and this is by no means me trying to say like isolation smaller than shame, or it's not as important. The reason I set it up this way is because isolation, if you see it on the screen, is it's smaller, because when we isolate, we tend to feel smaller. We tend to feel less important or not good enough or not like we want to hurt other people or be a certain way around other people. So we tend to separate and isolate, and that makes us feel smaller because we aren't connected to the greater community of people. And this moves me into some things that I want to highlight for you guys because I want you to understand more of what actually contributed to my struggles with self stigma. Why did I struggle from the ages of 12 years old all the way up until like, I mean, I still struggle with it. So I can't lie to you guys and say I don't struggle with self stigma. I'm great because we all still do, right? So some of these things on the screen. So for me personally, myself, I have struggled with receiving a misdiagnosis. I received a diagnosis of depression when I was 16 years old. And that's very common in a lot of people that you might meet who live with bipolar disorder. So I live with bipolar 1 disorder, but I know many people who live with bipolar 1, bipolar 2. There's different symptoms and things that go on. But I've also struggled with, I've never been diagnosed with an eating disorder, but I've definitely 100% have struggled with disordered eating patterns. And SMI diagnosis, that stands for serious mental illness. So I received a SMI diagnosis of bipolar 1, and I received that when I was placed on court-ordered treatment. And I survived suicide attempts, substance abuse, abusive relationships, bullying, sexual abuse, all of these things here. But I wanted to lay it out on the screen for you guys because I wanted to be very clear into what were these things, right? So to give you an idea of how did this come about, right? How did Paris end up in a hospital? It doesn't make sense to me. So this is a picture of me when I went back and I was hospitalized at 19, right? The thing that most people understand or come to understand about me is that I did go back and I worked at the same exact facility where I received my diagnosis of bipolar 1. And I really thought that going back there was going to be my full circle moment in being able to help people, make a difference, serve people who were in the same position as me. But I could not have been further from the truth. I was way off. And that is because I was not ready to embrace vulnerability. I was not ready to tell my story. I was not ready to share my experiences. I was not even ready to fully accept help. And that made me really sad because I was very lucky, I feel like, to be in a position where I had access, you guys. And that's the thing is there's a lot of people out here that I fight for every single day who do not have access to therapy. They do not have access to these resources. And that's why I speak on these topics is because I did have access to that. And I was able to go and use therapy and start to break down the barriers and break down the walls that I had put up on myself. So obviously you see me in the picture in the left corner. I'm on the phone. I would get a lot of phone calls all the time. And I really love the work that I did. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, it was very challenging. It is not an easy industry. And I commend every single person that I know who dedicates their life to working in the behavioral health field because each and every one of you, you are truly angels because it's not easy and we all struggle. I mean, people taking the calls, people making the calls, people running the companies, and this gets into this point, right? So how is self-stigma kept so strong, right? What is it that feeds this shame, this fear, and this isolation? So how did it manifest for me, right? So something that I want to illustrate for you guys is these images here. So consequences of self-stigma. So for me personally, these are some of the things that I dealt with. So I had a lot of self-sabotage, rumination, social withdrawal, suicidal ideation. So many of you guys are very familiar with these things. You know, you've heard these terms, you might have experienced them, you might have worked with people in the field who have experienced these things. But for me, what does self-sabotage look like? Right? Because I spent a very long time, you guys, living in a place where I didn't even know what that meant. I did not even know that I was actually self-sabotaging. I was putting up obstacles and barriers, and I was preventing myself from being able to move forward. And what does that look like, right? It looks like losing hope that I am ever going to be able to get better, right? So when I say better and I stopped taking my medication, so I was put on medication, court order treatment, SMI diagnosis, and I only had one period in my life where it was actually two periods in my life where I was off my medication for, I think, like 3 months, right? And then there was another time where it was maybe like a month or something like that. But that happened because of self stigma, right? So I had a lot of stigma, but then I was around people and I was around people who were telling me, hey, you look like you're doing so well, right? Why do you need medicine? And I realized later that this is the thing is whatever works for you works for you. Never let someone tell you that you shouldn't or don't need or whatever people will say. And oftentimes people will do it out of love. They will do it because they care about you. But I was listening to the wrong voices. I was listening to people who wanted me to go back to the party girl, the fun, loud, out of control, wild Paris, right? And that is not a good, I mean, that was a fun Paris, but that isn't a good Paris because that Paris was not happy internally, very, very suicidal ideation, right? So what does that look like? So it for me it started to manifest in negative thinking patterns, and then that started to escalate into self-harm, cutting myself, not eating, restricting. Like it was a lot of different behaviors that I had. And attempting to end my life at 15 years old. And then because of that, I started to really withdraw socially from people that I had been very close to. And it was very hard for the people around me. It was very, very difficult for my family, for my friends, because they didn't know what to do. Right. And they told me later on, I didn't know what to say to you. I didn't know how to help you. And that leads to rumination for me. Right. So, what is rumination? Right. So, for me, it meant I really believed that the world was against me. I was plagued with such negative thinking patterns that it was so difficult for me to make my way out of that. And why is that damaging, right? So it's damaging because of these things right here. So you typically might hear someone say these things. I've definitely said all of them. So one of them, or I've been told these things from other people. So an example is you don't even look bipolar, right? Or you are doing so well. Why do you still take meds? Or this one right here where it says, at work, I was laughed at when I mentioned my diagnosis, and I told myself I'd never bring it up again. Or I just want people to see me as me and not bipolar me. And that's one of the reasons I don't tell people. So these are things that I have said to myself. And these are also things that I have heard said to me from other people who also live with the diagnosis of bipolar. And it would make me really sad. And it would make me feel like we need to do better, right? To educate people to understand, what does bipolar look like, right? How does it present? Because it's different for everyone, right? Because maybe for me, something that's happening for me might not be the same in someone else who also has the same diagnosis. So that's something I want to emphasize for you guys, is especially that this one on the screen where it says you don't even look bipolar. I can't tell you how many people have shared with me that they received this diagnosis and then they shared it with people and they were told, and sometimes I think people don't do it in a way to be hurtful. They just don't understand, right? So they just say, oh, you don't even look like that, because they have a preconceived notion of this is what bipolar is, right? So the more we have these conversations and the more we open up to these type of topics, we help really break down those barriers for people to feel safe asking you, like, hey, for people to even be able to come to you and say, hey, I'm so sorry, but like, I don't know what bipolar is. I don't know anyone. I don't understand it. It doesn't make sense. And I'll give you guys an example. I was actually somewhere recently and someone asked me a question about what does bipolar mean, or what does it look like? And then I was talking with this person, and I said, do you know anyone who has a diagnosis of bipolar? And then they said, well, I think that's this guy I dated, he's definitely bipolar because he was psycho. He's psychotic. And I remember looking at this person, and I chose to educate them and to not, because the old Paris would have been like, oh no, like I'm gonna tell this person. But I was like, no, I'm gonna use this as an opportunity to let this person know, here's how bipolar presents for me. I don't know your experience with the person that you were dating, but what I can tell you is that person probably was hurting, or they didn't feel seen, they didn't feel safe, they didn't feel valued, they didn't feel something to make them express what they did in the way they did. So, and it was a really good conversation. Like, we were able to actually have such a good conversation because I was able to let this person honestly share how they felt, right? Without me going into attack mode. And this is something else I want to share. Um, Hold on the screen. Okay, perfect. Okay, so combating what keeps the roots of self stigma flourishing. So that's what I did, right? In that last example I gave you guys, obviously I'm presented with someone, and that isn't, I'm going to be honest, it is a trigger for me when I hear people say that. When I hear people say they're psychotic, they're psycho, that is stigmatizing language. No one wants, who wants to raise their hand, right? And say, oh, all day long, I want to be called a psychotic person. Nobody, right? So how do we combat shame and fear and isolation? We do that through relationships. So shame, at least in my instance, and the people that I've had the pleasure of connecting with through my business and what I do for work, is they talk about relationships. So relationships start with the one that we have with ourselves. So we are the foundation for everything. If we do not think that we are deserving, that we are enough, that we are deserving of peace and healing, we will never be able to cultivate that, to accept the help, right? So that's the first step. We really got to really see that, because you guys, all of us are worth it. Every single one of us on this webinar right now, maybe if you're watching the recording, all of you have so much value, so much worth, so much potential. And as soon as you can see that and realize that and tap into that, that's when things start to shift. It's not going to be right away. It's going to take time, but that's what helps us move into fear, right? So we're going to feel fear, right? We're going to feel fear when we're faced with breaking down these barriers to move past the stigma that we've been carrying. So how do we do that? So for me, I have done that through finding purpose. And I found purpose in this work right here, right? When Jake reached out, Debbie, you guys are incredible. When we got connected and we said, hey, we want to do this webinar. And I said, absolutely. And I said, I'm going to talk about this because this is what helps all of us break out of isolation, right? So isolation is the last point, and that is built through community, right? So what does that mean? What is community? So I'll give you a good example is International Bipolar Foundation is an incredible community of people, whether you live with bipolar, you do research, you help contribute, you raise money, whatever your role is, or maybe you're just someone who you love you love the Instagram page, you love the content, right? No matter who you are or what role you play, you're part of the community. You're part of you're part of this united front of people who are coming together to help each other break out of isolation. And that's what we're here to do. And that's what that's, at least in my opinion, is what we do to move through this. And I want to share with you guys a few ways that I have been personally able to work towards eliminating the self-stigma that has been living inside of myself and continues to come up from time to time. So what have I done, right? So obviously you see a lot of pictures on the screen, but you're like, okay, what do these mean? Where are all these pictures? So the left picture is me, and that is a picture of me And what this means to me is my podcast, right? So Live Well Bipolar is my podcast that I launched 5 years ago to really help bring forward resources, free resources for people all over the world who are living with bipolar, loving people who live with bipolar, or serving people who live with bipolar, feel more connected, more seen, more able to access what they need to do. And another picture I put on the screen is me speaking at NamiCon this past June. So why did I include that picture? I included that picture because speaking out about my experiences is something that used to scare me so much. You guys, like, I can't even tell you. I was the kid in school who I would hide, or I would like, I would run to the bathroom when I would have to read out loud. We would play popcorn and I would have to read. I hated public speaking. I hated talking in front of people. And I feel like facing that fear is really what has helped me be able to build the community that I have, to bring people together. And it's not even about me. It's about helping people out of darkness and out of that isolation. And one of the ways I've done that is this other picture that you see with my incredible friend John. So he's holding my book, and that is my story that I wrote that Jake talked about at the beginning. So it's called Crooked Illness right here, Lessons from Inside and Outside Hospital Walls. And that is what I wrote to really help people understand these three things. So you guys will see the cover. There's 3 doors. So this is my perspective moving from being a patient to provider to advocate. An advocate, I strategically made that the last door because every single one of us, you guys, we are all advocates. Because whether or not we live with mental illness, we all live with something that we've experienced that has been good or bad, that we have the potential to speak on, to make changes for so many people. And that's why I put these pictures together. And again, this slide, what helped me eliminate self-stigma? So first and foremost, it was healing the relationship with myself. And then it was getting out of isolation through volunteering, finding others, living with my diagnosis, creating community through my podcast, and discovering my purpose through advocacy. So all of these things, and I only wanted to pick 5 because I'm not going to fill the screen with too many words, because I don't like that. You guys, when I'm watching presentations and I see a lot of words, I'm like, I can't pay attention right now. I got to leave. So I say this because it's giving back, exactly what this picture says, right? Give back to move us all forward. So when we can collectively realize, like I have, that yes, I live with bipolar and it's not going to be easy, right? It's not always going to be an easy life. It never was meant to. But if I'm able to give back through volunteering, through advocacy, through speaking, through my podcast, through my book, through whatever way I can, I will always do that. Because I can't tell you guys, I wouldn't be on this presentation if it wasn't for all the people who came before me. If it was not for one of my incredible friends, Kevin Hines, you guys probably know him. If you don't, you should. You should go look him up, because he is somebody who uses his story and is so dedicated to that. And I feel like when we can do that, and we all have that, and that's the thing, is we all have such a gift. But that's not to say that all of us need to go out and into the world and be public speakers and write books and launch podcasts. We can do things in different ways, right? We can give back. And no matter how small it may seem to you, I'm telling you guys, that is huge to someone else, because I get messages every day from people all over the world, and they're saying, hey, you don't know me. You don't know me, but I'm going to tell you that I feel like I know you. And I've cried multiple times, like reading emails from people. And this is what I also want to share with you guys too, is this what I put together, this slide right here. So combating self-stigma. So we can do that in these ways, right? So we start with relationships, and that is the relationship with ourselves. And that is what will trickle into our relationship that we have with all other people. And then community, right? So you can either join one or you can build one. And you can do that in the way of, belonging to a safe environment, cultivating a support network, or finding a fulfilling career, right? And then the other side, when we're talking about self, relationships, so with ourself, we need to understand, how are we speaking to ourselves? What is our self-talk like? And then also our purpose, right? And I really want to focus on this because I've had a lot of people who I've spoken with over the years who tell me, hey, I don't know what my purpose is. I don't think I have one. And I will tell you, I'll be the first to tell you that you have a reason for being here. And I'll tell you, it's either advocating for yourself, for others, volunteering, giving back, using your voice, using your message. And we can do that through self-advocacy. We can work on cultivating a more positive self-talk through limiting what we consume, you guys. And when I say this, I don't just mean social media. Okay. I'm talking about nutrition, sleep, what we're watching, what we're listening to, who we are around, the environments we're putting our, everything that has to do with outside of ourselves and what we're letting into our minds, right? And our bodies and our souls and our spirits and whatever that may be. So looking at that and saying, do I need to be doing this right now? Right. And then we can do that through journaling, right? So getting out journals, writing things down, and then also cultivating habits that are going to help move us forward. And then also therapy and volunteering. And I wanted to read you guys this. So this is one of the slides here. So those are obviously my hospital socks, right? So many of you on this slideshow, you might have those or you might know what these look like, but I want to share something with you guys because I actually still have the socks, and I didn't wear them for this presentation, but I usually do wear them to my presentation. But I wanted to share this with you guys. So, okay. So one thing I kept with me after all these years was the one thing that managed to keep me warm while I spent 2 weeks in the hospital. Sitting here typing this final chapter, I looked down at the black and white rug I was sitting on in my living room. There they were, the socks. I had them on my feet 7 years later, and I still wear them to bed sometimes. I kept the hospital socks. Looking down at the brown pattern with white stripes in between made me think how far I have come. When I used to wear these socks, I felt trapped, but I couldn't bring myself to throw them out. Today, wearing them, I feel the best I've ever felt all of my life. These socks were the one thing that consistently stayed with me throughout the immense highs and lows I experienced as a patient on that psychiatric hospital floor. I wore them everywhere. I love them. I love them so much that I have them on right now as I type this final chapter. I want you to know that even in the lowest moments we experience with our mental health, there is always something as little or as small as a pair of socks that can make us smile. They've been on my feet as I would struggle to pull myself off those hospital floors, and they are with me now as I write the conclusion to a story that I hope has helped you because I know it has helped me. And then I also want to thank you guys so much because it means the world to me that you took the time out of your day to show up here. So you can stay connected with me. Instagram, paris.scobie, parisscobie.com. And then I also have a free gift for you guys. So if you scan this QR code, I put together a free bipolar wellness workbook that you can go on, you can access, you can work through yourself. So if you scan this code, answer these questions, you will be able to download the free gift. And that, I believe, let me see, then that's it. That is the end of the presentation. And I want to pass it on back to Jake. And if anyone has any questions, I would be more than happy to answer those. And thank you guys.
Yeah, Paris, I want to thank you so much. You're really an inspiration, and I'm just so happy that, we got to get on here and do this talk. I'm inspired by your story. I'm sure our audience as well. So I want to thank you for all the lives you're touching. And yeah, like you just said, we're going to go into the Q&A portion of today's webinar. So if you have your questions, please type them in the chat. This is one of our favorite parts of the webinar. We want to be able to answer as many questions as we can today. But yeah, starting off is one of our audience members wants to know is, what resources are out there for someone who has no means to pay anything for access to help with their bipolar disorder?
Yes, so I actually have an amazing resource, and I don't know if this person is local to Arizona or not. It doesn't. So, Hope Mental Health Foundation, they're actually having an event this Saturday. So, it's a Ruck for Freedom, and they are amazing because they have an application-based process where people can go onto their website, and I can send the link for you, Jake, so you can share it out after this webinar. But they're called Hope Mental Health Foundation, and on Instagram, they're Hope Gives. You can go on there and you can check out their website. And what they do is they help award and give therapy to people based on financial need. So they are such an amazing organization. I was at their gala like past 2 times, and I got to share my story on the impact that therapy has had on my life. But also, they are just absolutely phenomenal. Jen, the CEO, is such a great person, and these people, like, they fight for you. They will help you access those resources, and if they can't, then they will point you in the direction that you can go. And also, another free resource is NAMI. If you guys don't know NAMI, there's chapters all around the country. They have free support groups, free resources, and it's really great because it's open to the whole community. You can go on whenever you want. They have Zoom classes, they have in-person classes, so that's a really good resource.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing those, Paris. And we're gonna go forward with the next question is, how did you go about finding others living with bipolar disorder?
Yeah, so what I actually did, and it was pretty funny because if you guys go back and listen to the first episode of my podcast, I had no idea what I was doing. There's rocks crunching in the background. I'm literally in my mom's backyard. And I did that because I didn't know anyone. And I reached a point in my life where I was working at the same hospital that I was a patient at. And I ended up telling myself, I'm never going to be able to help people in the way that I was meant to, because I had a woman I was working with and I was at her house visiting her, and she was the same age as me, on the same medication as me, same diagnosis as me. And she looked at me and she said, she's like, you know what? I think I want to go back to school and, be able to learn something to help people with therapy. And I was telling her she should do it. But what I really, really wanted to say to her was so much more than that. I wanted to be like, you know what? I have this diagnosis. I live with the same thing. I'm on the same medicine. If I can do it, you can do it. And I wanted to say more. So I said I'm never going to be able to say more unless I start my podcast. And I was so scared, you guys, like I had no idea what I was doing, and I've learned so much. And I started that because I wanted to create a community for other people. I wanted to create a place where other people could like you can, I interview everyone. If you have bipolar, I don't care, who you are. I will speak with you and share your story because your story has as much value as any other person. So that's what I did is I started my podcast and I didn't know what I was doing 5 years ago.
That's great. And yeah, like I said, we thank you for doing your podcast as well. Just, your ability to amplify people's voices is making a difference every day. But moving forward with the next question is, one of our audience members, they live in a small town and they decided to start a peer support group themselves. And, they hosted it for several months, but attendance was low and they ended up, disbanding the support group. So do you have any tips for them?
Yes. So what I would say is do not let that discourage you, because when you first start something, it's a new thing, right? You've never done it before and you're doing it with good intentions. You want to help people. And I would definitely say a word of advice to you would be to never give up, right? And I know that I think you said that they aren't doing the support group anymore, but what I would say is to just build community, right? You can do that yourself, like just whether it's social media, email list, whatever, right? Method. But I would say just to get around people who are good people, who are open and vulnerable. And I think that is what will lift you up and inspire you to say, you know what? I can do this thing. I can start this support group. And what I want to tell you guys is everyone starts from zero. We all start from zero followers. Like my show, it didn't end up getting to 130 listeners, countries around the world by overnight. I've been doing this for 5 years, you guys. And I've had many days where, I would sit there and I still would be like, no one's going to care about this. Like, no one cares. But I think that's what we do. And I'm just trying to tell you, a word of advice is, you have made such an impact already by starting that support group. Like you probably don't even realize like what you've done for people. So I would say just never give up, like, because it means a lot. So just never stop doing what you're doing.
Mhm. Well, that's great. Yes, we're going to move forward to our next question, which is one of our audience members. They've been, facing some extreme stigma from their family. Unfortunately, they said that their sister disowned them when they were hospitalized, and they heard some very mean remarks from their father. So I was wondering if you had any, just tips or perspectives that they could look at to move forward with, dealing with this stigma.
Yeah, so I definitely can relate to that. And I talk about it a lot in my book. I don't know if the person who asked that question has read my book or not, but you can, because in there I've gone through that with my own family. And a lot of friends who sisters, dad, like all of it, everything. And what actually helped me is turning into myself, right? So not letting that hurt me, but also having forgiveness. And I know it's a lot easier said than done. It's not, it's easy for me to come on here and say, just forgive them, because it's hard. It's hard because when we're holding on to hurt and anger and pain, we don't want to just let it go. We're like, no, like that should mean something. But what I can tell you is that you are so worthy and deserving of love and acceptance. And I love you and I accept you and I'm here for you. And, you will always have a friend in me and my community. So if you do not follow me, you can connect with me on Instagram or Livable Bipolar Instagram podcast. Like I'll always be here to offer that support and guidance. And just share episodes, right? I mean, I have plenty of episodes I can probably send to you. I actually interviewed my sister, so if that's a pretty good one, but you guys can go on Spotify or Apple and they're all numbered. I think I have like 224 episodes, and you can just search for ones you want. And yeah, so I would definitely say don't let that make you feel not good enough, because what I'll tell you is usually the reason they reacted the way they did is because they don't understand it. And I think people, when they don't understand things, there's a lot of fear. And they tend to say things that are hurtful and mean. And sometimes they don't realize it. And even if you call them out on it and say, hey, that was mean, they still might not care. But I think what you could remember is that I care about you. We care about you. You deserve to be here. And just never let that, just ignore it. I'm here for you, we love you. But it's a lot easier said than done, so yeah.
Yeah, very well said. Yeah, we do indeed love you. And, Paris is here for you. IBPF is here for you, and you are very cared for. And our next question reads, what tips do you have for someone who is scared of sharing their diagnosis with their in-laws due to fear of rejection?
So advice I have for that is what I did. So my husband and I, we've been married for a year and a half. We met 6 years ago. And his mom, I remember, it was so cool because what I would say is be yourself, right? Just be you, and don't feel like you need to put on a front or an act, because I'm going to tell you this right now is, if your in-laws are not accepting of you when they learn about your experiences or what you've gone through, that is something that they have to deal with, right? So it's not something you did wrong. You are just being honest and you're sharing your story. So I would say my advice to you is just to be yourself, and your people will be your people no matter what.
Love that. And our next question is pertaining to your book, is why did you choose the word crooked in the book title Crooked Illness?
I love that question. Okay, so I chose the word crooked illness because we cannot always see the ways in which we're being crooked to our own selves and then to the world around us. So I actually have a podcast episode about that. So I break down like the whole story, right, on how the name came to me. I had a Word document that I was writing my book in, and I remember I woke up in the middle of the night and like wrote the name. I was like, I need to write this down because it's so perfectly explained my experiences. Is I had no insight, you guys, into like how bad I was treating myself and also how bad I ended up treating other people as a result of the pain that I did not let myself heal from. So, yeah. So, if you want to check out the episode, you can just search Crooked and it should be in there.
Well, perfect. And our next question is, when you were at your lowest moment, perhaps very depressed, what came to your mind that motivated you to take action to help yourself?
Yes. So, what motivated me to take action is remembering why I'm here. So, obviously, it's different. So, I'm actually going through a really hard time right now, a really, really, probably one of the most difficult times in my entire life. And what is helping me now is obviously therapy, my support network, my husband, my amazing friends and family, and things like that. But what I do is I just take time offline because I think I tend to spend so much time on my phone. Like I'm always on there. And part of that is because I love you guys so much and I want to be there for you. But my advice would be to just remember that it's okay to feel depression. It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to cry and scream and whatever and have those feelings and expressions. But I also want you to know that you do not need to stay there, right? You won't stay there. And but you will stay there if you keep yourself there. And I definitely have had moments where I want to be sad. I'm like, I just want to be sad. I don't want to like be happy right now. So what I will say is to give yourself grace and to listen to your body, listen to what your mind is telling you when it's good, right? Don't listen to your mind when your mind is telling you bad things because that's not true because you are so beautiful and you are so worth being here.
Mhm. Very, very well said. And the next question is, how have you been living well with bipolar? Do you still experience depression and hypomania or mania? And if so, how do you manage these mood shifts?
Yes, so still do, but to tell you guys the truth, I'm bipolar 1, right? So bipolar 1 is depression and mania. Bipolar 2 is depression and hypomania, right? And also I'm not a doctor, so I'm someone who lives with this, so I'll tell you my experiences. So I've always had more of the manic side than the depression. I had a very bad period, probably from like 12 or even younger than that, all the way up until I was almost 19. That was all depression, like just severe, chronic suicidality, just really, really, really bad. But I think I survived it because I just I just was a fighter. I just would push through all the time. But I think for me, mania, I always have more of like a heightened level of that. And I think what helps me with that is grounding myself, my routine, obviously therapy, medication, and understanding that I'm not alone, right? I have a whole community now. Like I have people, I'm so lucky that I know so many people around the world who live with bipolar because I know I'm not alone anymore. So my message on that would be, yeah, we're not alone. And we think we are a lot of the times, but we never are.
Mhm. That is very true. We are never alone. And our next question is another one about your book, which is, where is the best place to purchase your book?
Yes. So the best place to purchase my book is at the link in my bio on Instagram or it's on Amazon. So that link is it's on Amazon. You just got to go on Amazon and you just search. You literally just type in crooked illness. So it's right here. And I also do have a few copies left on me, and I rarely have copies on me. So if you would like a signed copy, that comes with a bookmark for you. And I sign a full page as well. So if you guys would like that, you can just send me a DM on Instagram. So it's either local bipolar or paris.scobie and just send me the word book. So send me the word book and then we can get that. I need a couple things, your address, all of that. And then we can facilitate how to get that over to you because I would love to do that. I always love signing copies for people because then you have that note to look back on. And you guys, I don't just sign my name. Like I don't just like, no, you get more than that. You get my heart, you get everything. So yeah, so you can get on Amazon or you can send me a DM. But yeah, I can't wait to hear what you guys think of it, because that's what makes me so excited, is hearing what you connect with in my story.
Hmm. Fantastic. And our next one is another question about your book is, were any family and friends mad when you published your book?
No, actually. So the reason for that is because prior to publishing it, I spoke with everyone. And I also did change names. So you guys, when you see the book, there's like a section here where it says like there's names that have been changed and altered, because out of like respect for people, I'm not going to use someone's real name. But I've spoken with every single person who was mentioned in my book beforehand. So yeah. So I would recommend doing that. So if you're going to publish a memoir, like, don't publish it before you talk to people, because that's probably not going to go well if you do that.
That sounds about right. And that's amazing. And our next question is, what feelings did you feel when you first got to your first inpatient facility as a patient? And how did you overcome these feelings that helped you through your stay?
Yes. So I have only had one hospitalization. And so was the question asking like how I felt when I got there?
Yeah, so how you felt and how did you overcome these feelings?
Oh, okay. So I felt terrified. Like, so, okay, I talk about it in here, like in way better detail than I can tell you guys right now, but it was so scary. Because I think I just take on a lot of people's energy, pain and stuff. So I was consuming everything. And like it's a crisis center. You're in a center where people, are taken off the streets for, overdosing, or they had this one woman had her child taken away from her. Another man just tried to take his life. He had like rope burns on his neck. So like you're in a place where it's like very, very, very like heightened crisis. So I was terrified. I couldn't sleep. I was crying. I was restrained against my will. I was held down by four people and injected with something, and that was terrifying, so scary. But what helped me move past that, I think, was calming myself down by realizing that this is temporary, right? I'm here right now. I'm trying to get the help that I need. I'm going to get the help that I need, and I'm going to make it out, and I'm going to change the world. So that's what helped me.
And you're doing just that, Paris. So
Oh,
thank
thank
you.
you.
Um, yeah, so we have time for one more question today, and that is, do you know any other people who have just had one hospitalization in their life like you?
I do. Yes. So I do know some people, and I know people who've had, I know people who've had up to like 19
Mhm.
hospitalizations. So everyone's different, but I would say that, yeah, I do know some people like me who've only had one.
Mhm. Well, thanks for sharing. And then a couple more questions. They're more comments than questions, but we have a couple thank yous in the chat. So
Ugh, I want to see the chat. I wish I could see
um,
it.
I believe you might be able to see it if you click the Q&A at the bottom. I think you have access to that. But
I clicked Q&A and it's not letting me see it.
oh, well, they're very appreciative. So
Oh, okay, maybe you can send them to me or like save them because I want to see them.
yeah.
Oh.
And yeah, so that's gonna be just about all the time we have today. Paris from IBPF, thank you so much for sharing your story on our platform, and not only the platform, but your platform as well, and all the work you are doing, to help those affected by bipolar disorder, whether it's, the individuals themselves or their family members, just seeking hope and learning more about, the illness in general. And I also want to ask you if you have any more closing comments.
So my closing comment would be, I first want to thank you, Jake, for doing such an amazing job at hosting this and putting this thing together. And also Debbie, we got to give her some love too, because I saw her in the background. And I just need to let everyone know, I just want to thank you guys for being here, for making the time to show up. And my last closing remark would be to let everybody know that you are enough. You are worthy. You are here for a reason. You are making a bigger impact than you realize. And you can stay in touch with me. So if you haven't already scanned that code, you can do that. You can get the free workbook that I put out for you. And you can follow me on Instagram. It's at Live Well Bipolar or at Paris Scobie. Podcast is free resource. Books on Amazon. Send me the DM book. And if you would like a signed copy. And yeah, so I look forward to staying in touch with you guys and to continue to support the great work you do at the foundation, because you guys are killing it. You're crushing it. And I love people who are just as passionate about this, because it makes such a difference for so many people. So I'm so thankful for you for asking me to come on and share this. So I love it. I love this conversation. I feel like we can have so many more, because I can just talk to you all day, I feel like.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Paris, and thank you to everyone in attendance today. We'd love to hear your feedback. You can email info@ibpf.org to leave any comments you may have. And this webinar will also be published on our website at ibpf.org and our YouTube channel, International Bipolar Foundation. And with that being said, I hope everyone has a lovely day.